A military record in Poland lists something that should not exist: a bear officially enlisted as a soldier. No myth, no folklore. Documented. His name was Wojtek. But the real question is not who he was. It's why he was ever allowed to become a soldier at all. How does a war machine accept a brown bear into its ranks, assign him to carry ammunition, and later promote him to corporal after one of the fiercest battles in the Italian campaign? And why did entire military archives quietly downplay his role after 1945? Some accounts suggest he became a symbol soldiers were told to forget. Others claim higher command never wanted the embarrassment of his story becoming public. What really happened inside the Polish army, and why this impossible soldier was almost erased, reveals a truth history tried to bury. To understand how a bear ends up in a war, you have to understand the world that produced him. In 1943, a group of Polish soldiers found a small bear cub in the mountains of Iran. He was alone, probably no more than a few weeks old, his mother nowhere to be found. The soldiers were part of the Polish Second Corps, a unit formed from men who had survived extraordinary suffering. Many of them had been prisoners in Soviet labor camps following the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939. They had walked, starved, and fought their way across Central Asia to reach the Middle East and rejoin the Allied cause. These were men who had lost almost everything. And when they found the cub, something in them recognized a creature that was also alone in the world, without a mother and without a home. They named him Wojtek, which in Polish means one who enjoys war or joyful warrior, and they decided to keep him. What began as a moment of compassion very quickly became something more complicated and more remarkable. Wojtek was not kept in a cage. He was not treated as a mascot at a distance. He was integrated into the daily life of the unit with a completeness that still seems almost impossible to comprehend. The soldiers fed him from a bottle at first, using condensed milk and fruit juice, and sometimes honey. As he grew, he ate whatever the soldiers ate, including biscuits and marmalade and fruit and the occasional cigarette. Not because anyone thought this was healthy, but because Wojtek had watched the soldiers smoke and decided that he wanted to participate. He learned by watching. He mimicked. He observed the daily patterns of military camp life and made himself a part of them in ways that went far beyond what anyone had expected of a bear living among humans. He learned to carry things by watching the soldiers carry things. He learned to march by watching the soldiers march. He learned to salute, though the salute was more a raised paw than a crisp military gesture, and the officers who received it reported finding it difficult to maintain their composure. He discovered that certain soldiers kept beer hidden in their tents, and he developed a preference for it, though he was equally enthusiastic about carbonated water when beer was unavailable. He learned to operate the showers in camp, which created significant problems because he could turn them on, but had not mastered the concept of turning them off. He wrestled. He played. He greeted visitors with a directness that sometimes alarmed people who had not been briefed on his existence before arriving at the camp. And through all of it, the soldiers of the Polish Second Corps did not experience him as an animal they were looking after, but as a companion they were serving alongside. The question of what to do with Wojtek when the Corps was deployed became unavoidable in 1944. The Allied campaign in Italy was one of the most difficult and costly of the entire war. The Germans had fortified the Italian peninsula in depth, using the mountains and rivers as natural defensive lines that had to be taken one by one at enormous human cost. The Second Corps was assigned to participate in the assault on Monte Cassino, a German defensive position on a hilltop monastery that had already repelled Allied attacks for months and had become a symbol of the grinding, brutal nature of the Italian campaign. Taking Wojtek to a combat zone presented obvious practical and ethical questions. Not taking him would have required leaving him behind with strangers, which the soldiers refused to consider. The solution they arrived at was characteristically direct. They formally enlisted Wojtek as a private in the Polish army, gave him a paybook and a number, and took him to war. The Battle of Monte Cassino began for the Polish Second Corps in May 1944. The fighting was intense and costly. The Germans held positions in and around the monastery that provided commanding views of the approaches, and the attacking forces had to move uphill under sustained fire across terrain that offered almost no cover. The soldiers carried ammunition and supplies forward through conditions that exhausted and depleted them continuously. And Wojtek, watching the soldiers carry artillery shells and ammunition boxes, did what he had always done in camp when he observed the soldiers working. He walked over, stood upright, opened his arms, and waited to be loaded. The soldiers loaded him. He carried the shells forward. He worked alongside the men for the duration of the battle, carrying ammunition in a way that freed up human soldiers for other tasks and that demonstrated, in the most practical possible terms, that his integration into the unit had been complete and genuine. He never dropped a shell. He never spooked under fire. He simply worked. The German positions at Monte Cassino fell to Allied forces on May 18, 1944, after some of the most intense fighting of the Italian campaign. The Polish Corps suffered thousands of casualties. The victory came at an enormous cost in human life and suffering. And in the aftermath, as the surviving soldiers regrouped and took stock of what they had endured and what they had achieved, Wojtek was there with them, as he had been throughout. The image of a bear carrying artillery shells at Monte Cassino was so striking that it was eventually incorporated into the official insignia of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company, the unit with which Wojtek had most closely worked. A stylized image of a bear carrying an artillery shell became their badge. It is still one of the more unusual unit insignia in the history of military heraldry, and it tells the story of what happened there more directly than most words could. After Monte Cassino, the Polish Second Corps continued fighting north through Italy. They participated in the assault on the Hitler Line, a German defensive fortification south of Rome, and in operations along the Adriatic coast. Wojtek continued with them through all of it. He was promoted from private to corporal following Monte Cassino, a decision that the soldiers treated as entirely appropriate given his service record, and that the military records of the unit reflect as a genuine administrative act. Corporal Wojtek of the Polish Second Corps had a paybook, a rank, and a combat record. He also had a growing international reputation, because the story of the bear who carried ammunition at Monte Cassino had begun to circulate among journalists and war correspondents, and the photographs and accounts that emerged from the campaign made Wojtek something of a celebrity beyond the confines of the unit itself. The end of the war in Europe in May 1945 raised a question that nobody in the unit had fully prepared for. What would happen to Wojtek when the soldiers went home? The answer, when it came, was deeply complicated by the political realities of post-war Europe. The soldiers of the Polish Second Corps could not go home to Poland. Poland had been effectively handed to Soviet control as part of the post-war settlement negotiated at Yalta, and returning to a Soviet-dominated Poland was not a genuine option for many of the men who had fought against both German and Soviet forces and who had political histories that made them targets in the new political order. The Second Corps was demobilized in Britain, and many of the soldiers settled there, unable to return to the country they had fought for throughout the entire war. Wojtek went with them to Britain, and in 1947 he was transferred to Edinburgh Zoo. The transition from military companion to zoo resident was, by all accounts, a difficult one for Wojtek. He had lived his entire adult life in human company, moving constantly, working, playing, interacting with dozens of people every day. The zoo was quiet by comparison, and the enclosure was nothing like the wide geography of a military campaign across multiple countries. The soldiers who had served with him came to visit whenever they could. Veterans of the Polish Second Corps living in Scotland made a point of traveling to Edinburgh to see him, and the visits had a quality that observers described as genuinely moving. Men who had survived extraordinary things standing at the barrier of a zoo enclosure talking to a bear who, on some level, seemed to recognize them. Wojtek would respond to Polish being spoken in a way that he did not respond to other languages. He would come to the edge of the enclosure when veterans arrived. The connection was real in whatever terms a bear can sustain a real connection to the humans who had been his family. Wojtek died in December 1963 at the age of approximately 21 or 22 years old, which is a full and relatively long life for a bear. He was buried in Edinburgh, and the city and country had by that point developed a genuine affection for him that went beyond curiosity about an unusual story. He had become part of the collective memory of the Polish soldiers who had settled in Scotland, a living link to the war they had fought and the home they could not return to. When he died, the response from the Polish community in Britain reflected how deeply he had been integrated into their sense of identity and shared history. He was not just a bear. He was a witness to what they had survived and a symbol of the unlikely bonds that extreme circumstances produce between creatures who find themselves in the same situation at the same time. The memorials to Wojtek began during his lifetime and have continued since his death. There is a statue of him in Prince's Street Gardens in Edinburgh, unveiled in 2015, which shows him as a young bear on his hind legs alongside a Polish soldier. There is another memorial in the grounds of the Imperial War Museum in London. The Polish Institute in Edinburgh maintains records of his service and his story as part of the broader history of the Polish soldiers who passed through Scotland during and after the war. His image appears in museums, in children's books, in documentaries, in academic histories of the Italian campaign. The story has proven remarkably durable not because it is sentimental, though it is that, but because it is true, and because the truth of it illuminates something real about what humans and animals can become to each other under pressure. There is a tendency to reduce Wojtek to a charming anecdote, a footnote in the larger history of the Second World War, a story you tell to lighten the mood after covering the more serious material. That reduction is a mistake. The story of Wojtek is inseparable from the story of the Polish Second Corps, and the story of the Polish Second Corps is one of the most extraordinary stories of the entire war. These were men who had survived Soviet imprisonment, who had walked out of labor camps in Siberia and Central Asia, who had made their way through Iran and Palestine and North Africa before reaching Italy, who had fought without the possibility of returning home, and without the certainty that anything they were fighting for would survive the political negotiations happening above their heads. They were fighting for a Poland that was being given away even as they bled for it. And in that context, Wojtek was not a distraction from the seriousness of what they were doing. He was an expression of it. He was proof that even in the worst circumstances, the capacity for genuine connection and care and loyalty does not disappear. It finds a form, whatever form is available. The question that stays with you after learning this story is not really about a bear. It is about the soldiers. It is about what it means to hold on to something gentle and alive and in need of care when everything around you is designed to take things away. The Polish soldiers who found Wojtek in the mountains of Iran had already lost their country, their families, their certainty about the future. They had been stripped of almost everything that gives ordinary life its structure and meaning. And when they found a small bear cub alone in the mountains, they did not calculate whether keeping him made strategic sense or whether the attachment was wise or whether the logistics would become complicated. They took him in. They raised him. They made him one of them. And he carried artillery shells at Monte Cassino. That sequence of events is not a coincidence. It is a portrait of who these men were. Wojtek the Bear holds the rank of corporal in the Polish army. His service record is real. His paybook existed. His promotion was documented. The insignia of the unit he served with bears his image. The memorials to him stand in 2 countries. The veterans who served alongside him visited him at the zoo for years. The children of those veterans grew up knowing his name, and most of the world has never heard his story. History Untold exists precisely for stories like this one. The ones that do not fit neatly into the conventional narratives of how wars are fought and who fights them, and what courage looks like when it is expressed in forms that no military manual anticipated. Wojtek did not choose his situation. Neither did the soldiers. But the choices they made within it produced something that has lasted 60 years past his death and shows no sign of fading. Some stories refuse to stay buried. This is one of them.